you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know?
Test, test. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it works. Thank you so much for inviting me here. This is my first time to Albuquerque, and so far I am loving it, and I need to come back. And I even know how to spell it now. I've written it out so many times, I actually think I know how to spell it, and I'm not very good at spelling. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And today I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite things, ghosts and photography. But before, I want to sort of set the mood, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about a ghost story. So I want you to imagine it's in the middle of the night in a house on the outskirts of a really small town in British Columbia, Canada, named Cranbrook. And across the street from this house is a forest where the Sasquatch hangs out. Yes. And while this picture evokes the image that I'd like you to think about, this is the actual house that this ghost story occurred in. This is in Cranbrook, and that arrow points to my bedroom. And imagine it's at night, and for those of you without an imagination, I'll try and help out. I'm going to make it a little bit more spooky. And it was just my mom and I who were at home at the time. My dad was working at night shift at a pulp mill named Skookumchuck. So those of you who listen to the Skeptic Zone podcast will have heard that word. It is a Canadian word, actually Western Canada. And my 6-year-old self, I was soundly asleep when I was woken up suddenly in the middle of the night by thump, thump, thump. And I looked outside my window. Nothing there. There's a street light. So that front path that's in front of the house there was actually illuminated. Nothing. And my 6-year-old pre-science brain tried to be rational and thought, oh, I must have been dreaming, something woke me up, I had a bad dream. And my memory is I went back to sleep. To only be woken up with thump, thump, thump once again. This time, when I looked out and there was nothing there, I screamed and ran into my mother's bedroom. She also had heard these footsteps and was quite terrified. So, just to help with your imagination, there's my ghost that I imagined. Now, this is me as a 6-year-old in front of that house. I was adorable, what happened? So, my dad built this house, and so I'm thinking, okay, we're in a brand new house, and we have a ghost. I thought ghosts only appeared in old houses and creepy places, not a brand spanking new house. So my mom and I, I'm gonna add some things here to my little talk. So, was this destined to be a haunted house right from the beginning? And what could possibly explain these strange footsteps that I experienced, my mom experienced in the middle of the night? Well, this was an organic ghost story. And just to let you know, too, that my mom did not think it was a ghost. My parents are pretty rational. I grew up in a very rational house. I was very lucky. And so my mom didn't think it was a ghost. She thought it was a man walking around outside the house, which I think is a little more scary. That's why she was so frightened. So what could it be? Well, my dad came home and we discovered what it was. What it was my parents had purchased from a farm, a local farm, a great big huge sack of potatoes and had put it on the landing outside of the kitchen. In the night, it had proceeded to fall over and empty slowly down the stairs to the basement. Thump, thump, thump. And I want to thank this man, Brian Dunning, for the organic ghost story title, because he played this on his Skeptoid podcast and called it an organic ghost story, but he also called it lame or something like that.
I thought you were going to accuse me of knocking over the potatoes.
Well, I guess that would have been a testable thing, right? If you could remotely knock them over. And just to get even for, some of the things he said on his podcast, I decided to ask Meta AI to create a picture of Brian Dunning as a potato ghost. And this is what I got. So that just...
That's what they are.
Yeah, you could be the judge. Well, there we go. That is Brian Dunning as a potato ghost. And hopefully that gets you in the mood for my talk today, which is going to be mostly about spirit photography and ghost photography. But before I get into that, let's get into why it's important that I talk about this. So who believes in ghosts? And I was astounded when I started my journey, and for those of you who don't know, I work with Susan Gerbic on the Guerrilla Skepticism Wikipedia project. Yeah. And I started looking into improving pages about hauntings and ghosts, etc. And I was astounded. I grew up in this sciencey family that didn't believe in ghosts, and I thought that ghosts were just something of the imagination, that they were movies, etc. Well, I found out that people actually do believe in ghosts. And according to a poll that was taken in 2021, 46% of Canadians believe in, quote, ghosts or supernatural beings. I could not discover what they meant by that. That's as broad as it was, so I think this is what they asked. And 46% said they do. 34% were firm skeptics, and the rest were unsure. That's a lot of people. And if you look at it by province, I am dismayed to say I'm from Alberta, Calgary, Alberta, and Alberta has the highest percentage of belief in Canada with 57%, and our neighboring British Columbia, where I said I was from, 39%, has the lowest in Canada. So neighboring conflict in ghosts. What about the US? 1990 Gallup poll. The question that they asked was, quote, ghosts, how many people believe that ghosts or other spirits of dead people can come back in certain places and situations? 25%. And they asked the same question in 2005. What do you think happened? It went up. Not a whole lot, to 32%. Not too bad. And in 2019, there was an Ipsos poll, and they represented a bunch of people, and they asked them if they believed in ghosts. So a different question, so take that for what it's worth. It's hard to compare, but it's more similar to the question that was asked in Canada. And this one was 2019, and it was 46%, equal to Canada. So Canada and the US are very similar in their ghost belief. Therefore, I think it's important to talk about. So let's take a look a little bit about the difference between old images, which I'll talk quite a bit about, and new images. And I find it really interesting how, as our equipment has improved, the quality of the spirit and ghost photography has deteriorated. You would think it would be the other way around. It seems to be inversely proportional. As the equipment improves, as more people get that equipment, we get worse photos. So let's talk a little bit about spirit photography. And one of the questions I have, and I get asked a lot, is what is the difference between spirit and ghost photography? In modern vernacular, they're interchanged all the time. You see it in articles, but I'm going to, for the purpose of this talk, use Joe Nichols' definition, and from his book, The Science of Ghosts, Searching for Spirits of the Dead. And what he says is that spirit photography was done in studios, in seance rooms, and it was purposely fraudulent. Ghost photography is generally something that is taken spontaneously, or you're looking for it, in cemeteries, abandoned buildings, haunted houses, battlegrounds, and it's often accidental, anomaly hunting after the fact, or it can be purposely fraudulent as well. I'm going to show you examples of all of those. So for the history of early photography, this is the first type of camera that was publicly available for photography, and it became much more accessible. Introduced in 1839, and it was used to photograph this guy, Abraham Lincoln, and he's going to become a very important part of my talk. So these early photographers actually recognized the possibility of fraudulent ghost photos early on. And they actually had exhibits, and they would love to experiment getting ghostly images, often by having people stand in front of or behind glass. And even to this day, some of the ghost photos that people claim are ghost photos are just reflections in the glass. And this is me traveling. This is how I take selfies. Now, I also want to talk about shutter speed because shutter is one of the main reasons that we get ghostly images. In the early days, a really common way of getting control over the light that was coming into the camera was this little lens cap that they would just rotate, and they would time it, and they would go, okay, a minute's up, I'll put it back, I'll close it. So very primitive, but they usually had to use longer exposures. So if the sitter moved or if somebody moved behind them, you would get a ghostly looking image. And these early photographers knew about this transparency and knew it could be abused. For example, this fellow, this is Etienne Jules Marais, and he recorded movements of horses and other animals and insects on glass. And glass plates they came around 1859. And this is when spirits really started to begin to show in fraudulent photographs. This fellow did not say these are ghost horses. He was studying the movement of horses by actually taking a photo over and over again on the same glass plate. So you would get this effect by not cleaning the glass plate properly. And if you didn't clean it all the way, it would really look quite transparent. He used it for scientific reasons, which is a good thing to do. No claim that ghosts were real. Another reason that ghosts or spirit photography really blew up was because of the spiritualism movement, which was between 1840 and the 1920s. And another contributing factor was the American Civil War ended. And there were many grieving survivors, and they were hoping to reconnect with their dead loved ones, who often they didn't get to say goodbye to. And some of you may know, how many of you know about the Fox sisters? You know the Fox sisters? Most people. If you don't, check out the Wikipedia page. I don't have time. It's a whole other talk. And it's fascinating, and they really had a huge impact on this whole spiritualism movement. So all of these things contributed to priming people to believe in spirits in photographs. It's new technology, and here we go. This is the first guy who really took advantage of it. There were others who knew about this, but he was the first one to really make a living at it. And this is William Mumler, and this is a self-portrait with his cousin who had died 12 years earlier. And he was an American jewelry engraver in New York and Boston, but he decided that spirit photography would make him a whole lot more money, and it did. And this is his most famous. This is Mary Todd Lincoln with the ghost of her late husband, Abraham Lincoln, standing behind her. And this is just accomplished again by taking a photo, not erasing the glass plate, and then taking another one on top. This guy, P.T. Barnum, wasn't too happy that this was happening. So he knew about this trick and recreated it. And you can see there's a faint outline of Lincoln behind him. And P.T. Barnum actually went to court to testify against Mumler, who had been charged with fraud, because he was actually found out to be fraudulent. In fact, one of the people that appeared as a ghost in his photos was a witness at the trial because he was still alive. He was not dead. So even despite all this evidence, he was acquitted. And if you go to the Winchester Mystery House, they tell you this story, and then they kind of say, but he was acquitted. And you're thinking, so therefore maybe they were ghosts. And I'm like, oh, no, he just was acquitted. So another famous photographer is Edouard Bouguer, and he was from French, and he would wrap dolls in gauze and put pictures of faces on the doll, take the photo, and claim it was ghosts. This is one of his best ones that I found. Most of them look pretty fake. And he was arrested in 1875, and he did make a full confession. William Hope, another very famous spiritualist, and he was one of the most famous spirit photographers of the early 20th century. And Harry Price, who was a British psychic researcher, thought they were fake. And so what he did with some other people is they made a glass plate, they etched it with X-ray mark, gave him the plate. When the plate was returned with the so-called ghost photo, that X-ray mark was not there. So they thought, oh, We've proven he's a fraud. That's going to be the end of it, but we all know how that goes. No, what happened is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle defended him. That's the Sherlock Holmes author. And he said that this was a conspiracy against hope. Sounds a little familiar. It seems like things just don't change. Now, the peak of the spirit photography was between 1880 and 1920. And it did fizzle out, thank goodness. And it fizzled out, I think, likely to people like Harry Houdini, who we have pictured here. And he would produce many different photos replicating what he was seeing. And here is another picture of Lincoln. Very popular person to appear in these photos, apparently. So now let's move on to ghost photography. Now when it comes to ghost photography, see how clear and beautiful that picture is? It's wonderful. So this appeared in a newspaper, the Mirror, and it said, ghostly face captured behind woman feeling very uncomfortable on Erie Island. And I'm thinking, yeah, but she kind of looks like a ghost too. It's just a bad picture. Who's the ghost in this picture? And so that's one of the categories, is that they're hazy and they're transparent. They're taking in poor lighting. Or the other kind that's very common, and I didn't know about this, and that's orbs. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that later. And I'm going to introduce you to Tim Scullion. Now, I learned about him through Kenny Biddle, an article he had written, and he is a ghostographer. That's what he calls himself, a ghostographer. And he's written 3 books about ghost photography. And his claim is that he did 8 years of research, a lot of experimentation, and took over 22,000 photographs to create this book, one of 3. So get yours soon, and you'll learn all about how ghost photography is real, but not. Latest book he had was in 2021. Now, on his Facebook page, he said this: I was asked to show the ghost in the photo for those that cannot zoom in. So here's the first crop showing the ghost at the far right of the house. Now, do you see the ghost at the far right? Can you see it? Yeah, if you're having trouble seeing it, yeah, the kind of transparent guy, we're going to talk about that more. If you can't see it, I'll blow it up for you. And I think possible long exposure. Remember how I talked about leaving the shutter open? If there's movement, you're going to get that ghostly image. There it is. And my good friend Kat Mack from Edmonton, Alberta, she pointed out that there's actually a shadow. I didn't know ghosts had shadows. I thought that was very interesting. If you actually go back to the original, there's a light porch that's causing this shadow that's right here, right? That's of the porch. That's the porch. And so it matches up quite nicely with a person being there and possibly a long exposure. And here's an example that I took of a long exposure. This is in Dublin. And I had it on my camera on a tripod. I left the shutter open, let's say for 25 seconds. I don't remember what it was. And you can see there's solid people hanging out with ghosts. And of course, the ghosts are people just moving and the other people are standing more still. So I asked him, did you just take a long exposure here? And he said, no. And then he wanted to sound like he knew what he was doing. He gave me all the settings. And I decided to be charitable and say, okay, maybe that's possible, because there's another technique that I'm aware of that is called photo stacking. Now, landscape photographers tend to use it, and you take multiple photos very quickly on like a burst, and then you stack them one on top of the other, and you get movement, because everything else is steady, so it's sharp, but things like water will move, people will look ghostly, and so I asked him, is this what you did? He deleted my comment. So I'm wondering if maybe that's what I did. I wish I'd taken a screenshot of me asking him the question. And it could be something else. There's so many other ways of doing this. You can even just cut the person out and make them more transparent in photo. There's lots of ways of doing it. But maybe I found it. This is on his website. He has real ghost photos, not fake ones. Real ghost photos, air quotes, exactly. And you can see they're lovely photos. Bad lighting, movement, difficult situations for camera phones or any camera unless you take it properly. But he's improving. This is his latest edition. Look at those. Those are quite artistic. I mean, at least they look like something a little more interesting. So I'm wondering, did he discover AI, or did he just get better, or a combination of both? We'll never know.
Those were bras.
I guess so. Apparently ghosts wear bras. Is that like a 15th or 18th century bra? I don't know, 19th century bra? Who knows? So I'm going to now move on into the psychic world, because my work with Susan Gerbic pointed out that this type of photography does end up in the psychic world as well, and there's a harm there for sure. And they will often have ghost photos as part of their readings. And this is a New Zealand psychic named Jeanette Wilson, and Kitty Biddle wrote about it. Can you see the ghost there? The apparent ghost. And apparently it's an evil ghost. You can sort of see it. It's very blurry. Long exposure is my best guess. And she offered to remove this evil spirit for a fee. Did she go to the house? No, she did it remotely. So there you go. What's the harm? It hurts your pocketbook. Plus, it induces fear. I think that's problematic. So here Wilson blows up a photo to find some troublesome spirits. And these are orbs. Orbs are just round artifacts on photos. I was shocked to learn that people were claiming these were spirits. As a photographer, I've been a serious photographer since around 2005, and you get this kind of stuff in your photos all the time. What do you, I was like, really? People believe this? First of all, they tell people that they're spirits, and then others believe it. But these ones are troublesome spirits. And if you can't see it, there we go. And then if you can look here, there's a whole bunch more. There's lots of other orbs with these children, but these are lovely spirits. In fact, they're the spirits of the children's dead grandparents. And I'll highlight some of them. There's a lot in this photo. And just to give you an example of me finding an orb, and apparently, depending on how big this is, if it's on a small screen, it's a good spirit, and if it's on a large screen like this, we can argue that it's an evil spirit that was following me in the mountains of near Banff. So this is not my favorite photo. I took a whole series of photos, and I only had this one photo with an orb in it, with the spirit. Can you see it? It's hard to see, isn't it? You see it? Yeah, we're anomaly hunting, right? We're looking for it. We're looking hard to say it so we can say ghost. There it is. Okay? It's not in any of my other photos. It's not a piece of a cloud. It's not anything else. Now, that's blown up bigger. On my screen, how do you tell it's good or evil? Well, according to Jeanette Wilson, if it has defined edges, it's a good spirit. If it has fuzzy edges, it's an evil spirit. So I'm looking on the screen here. It has very refined edges, so it's a good spirit. But up there, it looks a bit more fuzzy, doesn't it? Because I blew it up. So that's an evil. So I was being followed by a good evil spirit. What are these? I don't know. What are they from? Simple. It's usually dust hitting light close to your lens. They're really common if you had flash photography in the old days with the flash on top of the camera. But as you can see here, this is natural daylight, and I still got that artifact. And another thing that can cause it, snow, rain, dander, cloth fibers, bugs, etc. Lots of things can cause this artifact. And I was thrilled. When I was in LA after my talk, Ross from Ono Ross and Carey made this amazing, now he's a talented Photoshop editor, obviously. He made this brilliant art, and it says, inspired by Adrienne Hill's ghost photography talk at SkeptiCamp LA, I took this spirit photograph that also just happens to be an orb photo. Did you get the joke? Yes, very well done. Because there were people who didn't get it for a couple days after my talk, but we finally figured it out. And so if the joke isn't obvious, here you go. The ghost in the background is Roy Orbison. So I thought that was quite brilliant. So let's move on to this website that I discovered, actually a Facebook page, and it's called Gettysburg Ghost Pictures. And this group is very active. What they do, they submit photos to the page, and people anomaly hunt. They look for ghosts. They blow up parts, And they look and find ghosts, and they discuss it, and they discuss what the ghost might be of, etc. I did not join the group. I didn't want to join the group. And if you join the group, they make money somehow because they do offer tours. I believe they sell ghost hunting gadgets. And they have a very active live investigation group. And I looked at this photo, or I looked on this page, found a photo, and it was posted when I went to look. Within several hours, there were 70 comments and 70 people who had taken this photo and found ghosts. Take a close look, try and find ghosts, see if you can see any. They found lots. You see, an organic ghost is present. So, don't worry, because they blew up parts, and they found that's a ghost apparently. Faint blue circle in the center. Anyone see anything? Okay, let's go to the next one. What about this one? No? Yes? Oh, what'd you see?
It looks like a man pointing.
Oh, a man pointing. Oh, I see that now. I've never seen that before. Wow. Okay, another one. In the last conference, they said Bigfoot. Maybe.
I see an ostrich up to the right.
Oh! It's a ghost ostrich. There we go. How about this one?
My goodness.
Yeah, sticks. Here's another one. It's reaching. It looks like rocks in the face of a... There might be a face there with the two rocks and the path going through being a smile. I don't know. Not really sure. So let's look at the comments. Here's what they found. Is there someone left of the two green trees? Oh, great catch. Thanks. Looks like someone sitting on the ground looking at the grave. What grave? To the right of the green tree up the hill. Thank you. I see it now. There is some strange blurring. Ooh, surprise. But I'm not sure what it could be. There's someone right there. I see this one, and the one by the tree. I can see the man's face and hat, and I rarely see anything in the pictures online. I see his face. I'm looking at the other figure, ghost, or real person, at the top of the hill in white. And these go on and on and on. This is just a sample. Finally, I see nothing in this pic. However, for some reason, this scene sends shivers up my spine. I can't see anything in this pic either. But look, he's pointing the gun right at you. Can you circle it? Because I don't see anything. So I think you get the idea. But finally, not me, somebody with some sense shows up. Your brain is playing tricks on you. It's a common thing with humans. Our brains are constantly scanning for patterns, particularly the human faces. It's the same phenomena as seeing things in cloud formations or the silhouettes of trees. Nailed it. It's exactly what it is. But the replies were not particularly kind. This is one of the kind ones. I usually don't see anything in these photos. I didn't even scan the photo, and instantly I saw this face and body. Trust me, my mind is not playing any tricks on me. I know what I see. Very common statement. And then they kind of dogpiled on this poor person who came in, I think, in good faith, and said, "Why are you here if you don't believe?" Asked them to leave. So let's compare 2024 image of a ghost versus the 1899 image of a spirit, and remind ourselves that our technology is better, and yet the pictures of ghosts get worse. And I just want to be clear about something. There are professional photographers who do sell ghost photos, but they're works of art. And they're actually quite stunning. For example, this one here on Fine Art America. You can find some really interesting photos that people have taken of spirits, etc. What I find interesting, though, they don't say they're real, but they also don't say they're fake. So I guess they leave it up to the imagination. So they're interesting. I've done stuff like this with my kids at Halloween time. They love it. You know, get the blurry photo, make them into ghosts. They think it's great. And so that's fine. A work of art is fine. And then there's these AI-generated ones you can get on Etsy. And, you know, we've got the ghost in the forest, but the more interesting one, of course, is the ghost on the toilet. You can buy that at Etsy. And those are fun. I have no problem with these. I think we know they're not selling fear. They're not selling psychic powers or anything like that. It's when the psychics get involved. It's when fear gets involved, it can cause harm. And Ben Radford, who's sitting up here in the front, in his scientific paranormal investigation book, he talks about a family that left their home because of fear of it being haunted. But luckily, they did call CSI in Buffalo, and Ben looked into it and found out why everything actually happened. And if you want to find out more, you've got to buy his book and go and read it. And it's a great story. It's a very in-depth investigation, but they called a local priest and had an exorcism prior to finding out what was really happening. So fear can be harmful. Another example is in Canada. So Kenny Biddle, he recently investigated a haunting in a house in Canada of a ghost of a little boy, but he was able to figure out what it was. And so the woman was not as fearful. So there is harm in believing in ghosts. But we're going to have some fun before I get to some statistics. Yeah, that's me. I think I like me as a ghost. So there's a lot of ghost camera apps out there. This is Snapchat. I used for this, one of the add-ons in Snapchat. But in 2014, there were 250 ghost apps that could add a ghost to your picture. That's a lot. There's a lot less now, but there's still lots. I've had no trouble at all finding a whole lot of them. And here's just for fun, there's some more. A lot of them, and these ones are an example of it, a lot of the ghost apps, they add in crazy stuff from films, from publishing, so they're already in existence. So they're not unique, but they're fun, good for Halloween. What's the harm? Well, unfortunately, people who own pubs, who do ghost tours, etc., they will say, hey, look at the ghost we found, somebody shot a photo of in my hotel or pub, etc., it's haunted, to attract people. And there have been people who own hotels, etc., who have been found out because somebody will track it back to a ghost app. So there's some harm. I think it's fraudulent. I think it's fine for them to use it, but don't say it's real. So if you want to learn more about spirit and ghost photography, make sure you check out the Wikipedia page, which I actually rewrote a few years ago. Speaking of Wikipedia, I wanted to give a shout out to Susan Gerbic and the Girl of Skepticism on Wikipedia project. Which is a group who, if you don't already know, who try and make sure that there's really good information on Wikipedia that is evidence-based, that has excellent resources, and the right information. So those people who are sitting on the fence, their friends saying, hey, you know, I saw this ghost. They're going, I don't know if ghosts exist, and they check out the Wikipedia page, they're going to find good information. I don't think we're going to change many true believers, but you do hear of that occasionally. So let's look at my spooky stats. These are the 4 pages that I have completed. The first one in 2020, which was Haunted House, that got me going down this spirited rabbit hole. And you can see that as of last weekend, I had almost 1.9 million views on those pages. It's important to have good information on Wikipedia to help educate people properly. And I think you can see my most popular one is the Winchester Mystery House. Thank you, Brian Dunning, for alerting us to the terrible state of that page. And it's insane. Look at that, 30 days, 30,000 views. My social media, I'm lucky to get, 10 likes. So this is pretty amazing, and I'm in the background. Nobody knows it's me, well, except for you guys now. And it feels really good to be combating misinformation in the background like this, and it's just happening every day. So let's not ignore that low-hanging fruit. It's so important. I get asked that by people, why are you worrying about ghosts? Why do you waste your time on that? Why do you want to even go there? And I think convincing people that ghosts are improbable is actually quite challenging, and I think skeptics get that wrong. They go, this is easy. It's easy to no, it's not. It's hard to show that ghosts are improbable. It's difficult to extend to other widely debunked topics, such as the Sasquatch, flat Earth. We've seen people persistently want to talk about this stuff, despite evidence to the contrary. The beliefs do persist, and many people continue to embrace them. So projects like GSOW help protect those changing their minds, to protect those who are changing their minds or seeking information honestly that may otherwise not be swayed. So hopefully the right people see this kind of thing. And that was done by AI, by the way. It's amazing. I just said, give me Bigfoot, a psychic, a ghost, and an UFO. And this is what it came up with in about 5 seconds. So it's not to the caliber of a Celestial Ward, but it's way better than I could do. And thank you very much. And this photo, just to leave you with that, was taken by Kenny Biddle just recently of a ghost, a quote, ghost. And I'm not going to tell you how this was done. It was not probably what you think. Well, maybe it is. And if you want to know what it is, one of the people who helped was Susan Gerbic. So you can either ask me or Susan Gerbic how this happened. I think it looks like a giant rabbit ghost. What do you think? Ooh, hey, that's good. Oh, you can't fool you. It is a sheet falling. And anyone have an idea how they captured it? Camera's a good guess. What?
Camera. That's crazy.
I was actually quite surprised. It's really simple. He took a video, and then he picked a screenshot. That was it.
Okay.
So not even a long exposure, right? So there's so many ways of getting that blurry look. So don't be fooled by it. I don't think anybody in this crowd would be. But if you have friends who say, hey, I think I saw a ghost in my house because they saw a reflection of something in their glass that was a little out of focus, maybe you can have a conversation. Send them to the Spirit and Ghost Photography page. Thank you very much. Oh, questions? Like, do we have time? I don't know. Because I know we're over time because we started late, but do you want to have questions? If there are any? Sure.
I thought it was funny that Harry Price was debunking that photo.
I know.
And he's like the biggest hoaxer of all time.
Yes.
So.
I thought that was very ironic as well. It's a whole other topic, right? We can go down. But Harry Price was debunking somebody. I guess he was not wanting to be overshadowed, maybe.
No.
That's my guess.
He's not one to want to be overshadowed.
Any other questions?
So I have a question. Like you, I try and sometimes inject some skepticism into, Bigfoot Facebook pages and this and that, and my experience was just like yours. Like, at first they're like 4 people, then all of a sudden they just get piled on because no one wants to hear it.
Yes.
Or
deleted.
What's interesting to me is, as you point out, for a lot of these, they're obvious. If you are a photographer who has spent any time, so like for example, I have 2 books in my house that are allegedly by a professional photographer that have obvious camera artifacts.
Yes.
And I'm like, if you really do understand photography, then how could you possibly not know what this is? And so, so again, obviously, when you talk to professional photographers, they identify these things immediately. It's like, I've looked at this, but then I guess my question is like, how do we address that information gap, right? Because the average ghost hunter, they just want to get a million photos, they want to, cherry pick the ones that look weird and something you ignore. So on one hand, they're gonna anomaly hunt all they want, but then on the other hand, you have even amateur photographers who immediately recognize the gap. So how do we bridge that gap?
That's a great question, and I don't know. But
I had one way that worked really well with one of my step kids.
Yeah, you did do it one-on-one.
One-on-one.
Globally, much more difficult. Go ahead.
She was looking at these orbs, and she's like, my friend said that this is a ghost, blah, blah, blah. I was like, it's actually a water droplet. Well, look at it though, it doesn't look like a water droplet. And so I went online and I Googled waterfall photo. And there's a waterfall photo with 1 million orbs, and it's in the context. If you change the context, you show them a photograph where there's a lot of water, or a lot of dust, or a lot of bugs, your brain looks at it and goes, well, that's a lot of dust, that's like right up near the lens. or that's, and so and she still quite didn't get it, and then I'm like, okay, let's take our hands and a piece of paper, and let's cover up all of the water droplets except for that one. And she's like, that's the orb.
That's right.
Oh, and it just like, an 11-year-old, and just scales fell from her eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just one water droplet instead of the waterfall thing.
So it's a great example to change the context to something they're more familiar with. Also, I have to say, the question I would ask any ghost hunting group when they look at these photos, why don't they talk to a photographer? I don't understand why they don't. I don't think...
Because they'll get the answer they don't want.
But I like to be charitable and think that maybe it's just they don't think about it. They think they know better. They think that they can figure it out. That's my guess. I don't think that they don't want to know the answer. There's probably an element to that, though, in the back of their mind. They're going to dig their heels in to some extent. But that's my question. Why wouldn't they ask the expert?
I think part of it may be a denial of expertise. It's where they're like, well, I've been taking photographs for 30 years.
Right.
And yet, you still can't identify basic. That's the gap. They're like, well, I know they're professional photographers, but
they're overconfident in their own abilities.
Right.
And I guess I can speak to that a little bit too, because I'm a high school math teacher. I retired, that's what my profession was. And because everybody goes to school, everybody's an expert on how to run the classroom. And I can tell you they're not experts on how to run the classroom, because it's very different what they're telling me than what needs to be done. So I think there is that knowledge gap. There's an overconfidence in what they understand, so they don't seek out the help. How do we cross that gap? Maybe do what Kenny Biddle does, which is go to these conventions, have photos out on display, and educate. Because I think we need to go to them. They're not going to ask us there. Yeah.
I think you got to make sure that you find a way of allowing the person that you're talking to save face.
Yes.
You don't want them to feel stupid. So you have to find a way of saying it so that it's like, that I'm kind of curious myself. Let's see if we can figure that out together and allow them to go, oh yeah, I knew all along. Yeah, oh okay, I got it. Not like, gosh, I'm smarter than you and I figured it out. So you got to find a way.
You're stupid, that's an orb, and it's just
that's just an orb. How stupid can you be? But it's more like
having a conversation with
wow, I'm curious too. That sure looks interesting.
And find a commonality, find out what they know about camera photography. Say, hey, are you familiar with long exposures? They say no. Well, do you want me to explain it? Don't just start explaining it. Ask the question. If they say yes, let's have a discussion about long exposure. What do you think of it? What does it do? And have those types of things. So keeping the conversation going, finding some common ground. I would love to discover a real ghost. I think it would be really cool. So that's something we would have in common. Start the conversation there. And I think Kenny does a great job of that, from my understanding. He has conversations. He doesn't put up walls and give a lot of information. And I think that's a good way to do it. Great questions. Putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Randy, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know?